What is going on, everyone? I'm Joe Persinger, and this is the ever-evolving, never-ending Ready, Set podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. So I don't really find myself watching too much TV these days. I used to be really big into broadcast TV. I grew up in the 90s, the 2000s. YouTube really wasn't a thing until I was in my 20s. The internet was around, but, what a lot of kids don't understand these days is, when on the forefront, like the AOL days, back with the modems out, those things, it took hours to download a video, let alone a fucking picture. So I remember in those days, it was just, you would set something to download and just go out and hang out, or you just turn around and play your console, because the internet isn't what it is today, what it was back then. And I think a lot of people have a hard time kind of wrapping their heads around that, just like I do with like what 8 tracks are, or when the dollar was worth the dollar when it was on the gold standard, or when you can go to McDonald's and feed a family for $1. I think we all get my point now. YouTube seems to kind of been where I've migrated. I think in the podcast we've talked about how I used to love Survivor. I think my dad and my sister still watch it, but I can't do it anymore. It's just devolved. It's a game show, for crying out loud. So I don't understand why I'm watching a game show and all of a sudden I need to hear about why this person is gay or why they're a transformer for whatever reason. That's cool and all. Do you, bro? But I'm trying to watch people survive in the forest and win $1,000,000. And, this is kind of when I was really convinced. It wasn't even the genderist politics or the cramming of politics through. This is when I knew this show, I guess, jumped the shark. I don't know if reality shows jump the shark, but whatever the reality TV version of that is, would be because, when they switched, they had to do everything during COVID. They switched the rules around. So they basically said, because this is COVID, I'm assuming because, they're trying to get in and out of this country. So they had to do the game very quickly, or maybe they were up against a deadline for CBS to get that out. I don't know. I couldn't find any information on that specifically, but it seemed they were clearly in a rush to get this season out. So they, instead of it being, I think it was like 40 days, 36 days, kind of moved. I think it was at least a month, 35, 40 days. In the COVID one that they did, or, with the one that came out after COVID, it was a lot fast. It was more rushed. I don't even remember how many days they did. It might have been a month, maybe even 3 weeks. But the idea was we're going to throw things at you in a more of a fast pace to change the game, which I think that was leading on to more than they realized, because I gave them that. I was like, okay, well, COVID's going on. Everyone's kind of scrambling here. This is probably what they had to work with based on, for whatever reason, the Fiji government, CBS, whichever, the production company. It wasn't until I think this was 2022, the fall, because I watched them all the way through. I kind of gritted my teeth, or I just fast forward through, when because they were really getting gendery politic there, 2020, 2021. And I believe is the fall of 2022 when they started that one. If that's the one where the guy who won and donated all of his shit to the military, that was the season I stopped watching at. I think that was the last fall, basically. What I remember is them announcing that they were going to keep the same rules that they had during COVID. And, why is that a big deal, you ask? Well, if you look at who had been winning Survivor from 2000 to roughly 2020, it was the majority of men, I believe. And I think there was, I'm not saying women didn't win. There were a few, but the majority of those 20 people for the first 20 years, I think there was 30 to 40 players, I believe. It was mostly men. And then I think in the year that they shortened the season up, a woman magically wins. Now, why is that a big deal? Well, there's plenty of, I think there's a Bear Grylls thing out there that talks about, I can't believe what is it? Okay, we're talking about Survivor. We'll get to where the podcast is going. I promise. I want to ramble on about Survivor because this has been making me mad. It's what grinds my gears. So they shortened the COVID season, and again, if you look up to that point, it was mostly men. But in that COVID season, a woman won. So I'm sure there was some producer somewhere in that production house that was like, "Hey, you know what? I know how we can push this narrative. We can change the rules, sell it like this." Sell it like, the vaccine won't do anything to you. I'm allowed to say that on YouTube, right? The election's not rigged, right? I definitely know I can say that. So, they say like, oh, we're just going to do this to change the pace of the game, give it another angle. It's the ever-evolving game of Survivor, Or are you just thumbing the scale so you can get more chicks to win? Because that's what I'm guessing. So now I'm dealing with that. Now I'm dealing with random people talking about why they're gay or Transformers or whatever. Again, that is fine. But this show is about surviving in the jungle, winning $1 million, and the social parameters around that. Now, if you want to say like, oh, this is, this is relevant to society, blah, 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 blah. I mean, okay, I guess, but I don't need a 5-minute segment on why this person likes to suck cock. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't, this has nothing to do with the matter at hand. I mean, do you remember, what was that one game they used to play where it was like, no whammy, no whammy, no whammy, no whammy, stop.
All fake news.
It is phony stuff. Didn't happen. What if they were playing that game and then, instead of, the whammy stop, he's like, I would like to talk about why the environment is the environment. I mean, what the fuck is this? This is a game show. Nobody cares about your fucking politics. Okay. So, this is one of the reasons why I can't watch fucking TV anymore. I mean, you see it everywhere. I barely go to the movies anymore. I mean, I think my girlfriend and I, we tried to go watch Free Guy, and, just like any Hollywood producer, they just can't help themselves. And what are they doing? They're, I think there was a scene in Free Guy where they're, because the whole scene is it's like a GTA city and it's just mass chaos at all times. And they start talking about how, like, I don't remember the line specifically, but it was something basically like,
Billy, how many times a day are the banks robbed in your world?
Hardly ever, Guy.
What about corpses, Millie? You see a lot of those? How many an hour?
None per hour, Guy.
What about gun violence? See a lot of gun violence in your world?
Actually, that's a big problem, Guy. It's a massive problem.
I didn't see that coming.
You could see what they were trying to do, and it's just like, okay, I get it, that was kind of funny, but the problem is that I know what you're doing, so it loses its value in being funny right there off the bat. So I'm like, no more fucking movies. I can't do this. I can't be subjected to this crap. And then even when I go see Avatar 2, I think that was the last movie we went and saw, and I knew what I was signing up for. It was just, all right, well, how is this going to hit me? Why was every bad guy in Avatar white? I mean, good God, like, isn't that like racism right there in itself? Like, my little sister's like, reverse racism doesn't exist, like, okay, well then it's just racism then. I mean, I don't know what we're dancing around here. Like, when you take, reverse it. If it was just all a bunch of black guys, I'm sure that would become an issue. But because it's a bunch of white guys, it's not. I mean, Joe Rogan even said this. So you see what I'm saying? So it's like, it's really hard to watch media in general because I'm basically being preached at, told I'm a horrible person, all because of the color of my skin. Like, I don't need you to tell me how to feel or validate my feelings. If that's how you feel, if that's the kind of, content you want to put out there, hey man, I guess do you. But, this is a slippery slope because if you're allowed to put content out like that, why isn't the other side? You know what I mean? Not that I agree with that. I don't agree with the other side. I think both of those sides should just shut the fuck up in general, but that's not where we're at right now. It's just hard to consume this content at all, and I just barely watch TV anymore. It's just all about podcasts, I like PBD, Rogan, obviously, Tim Pool, although I'll say Tim Pool, I haven't really, the guests there, I'll put it on, but half the time I'm just playing Star Citizen with Mob. It's just, we got to get some videos of Star Citizen being played too. Eventually we'll get around to that too. Be prepared for that. Hopefully that will happen. I do like to procrastinate, so I wouldn't hold your breath either. Anyway, I don't really watch TV a lot anymore, and I used to watch commercials. I used to know all the commercials. Sometimes there's a YouTube channel. Shout out to Dave's Archives. Please check that out. Like and subscribe to his channel. You might as well like and subscribe to our channel. Might as well like the video down there if you could too, but check out Dave's Archives. He's got some really cool commercials that he transfers over from VHS. And yeah, sometimes I watch the ones from the 90s. It's really good throwback. But one of the things that kind of, that comes out to me when you watch these commercials is how much everything was cheaper back then, even more so than 5-10 years ago. Like the other day I saw one where they were talking about a Red Lobster special for $4.99. That means if you were going to make, because they're, those restaurants were trying to compete almost with fast food. So that means fast food was probably $2.99, $3.99. It's just crazy how just everything's, the bottom is falling off essentially. Now, back then though, and even if you watch any of these commercials from Dave's archives, or there's a few other guys that do them too. One of the things you notice is the families, the people or the characters that they're casting within these commercials, and also like the class of people that are being portrayed in these commercials, they're very middle class. I would even say, in the middle to like lower side of the spectrum. It's very stark in contrast compared to today, where you watch commercials and everyone's just some uber rich dude, Like, I mean, it makes sense. You're watching an Audi commercial. Of course, some guy's going to live in some ultra-modern house that's, boxy and probably sitting on a nice piece of land in the mountains. I mean, I get that. But, like, we're talking, like, houses that, were considered, pretty mild standard for the time. You're not these high, huge vaulted ceilings and huge rooms where you could park 5 cars in. It's just a little middle-class suburban home. And you just don't see that anymore. And the other thing that you don't see back then is celebrities hawking products constantly. Like it's just I mean, you'd see a mayonnaise commercial and it's just a family of nobodies, talking, and however it's marketed is marketed. And today it's just like whenever I have like ESPN, I don't have ESPN on that often, but when I do, it's a Monday Night Football game or whatnot. And I'm trying to think what else I would be watching. Sometimes I watch Seinfeld at Comedy Central, and I think that's where I'm subjected to these commercials. And, I just wanted to go through a quick example of what I'm always seeing. So let's go to that here. So here's one. It's just like, I guess the theme here is like a lot of these, I mean, there's more celebrities that do commercials, but I just kind of picked like all these SNL people that have left the show. Like these SNL, it used to be you leave the show because you're doing movies in Hollywood. Mike Myers, Dana Carvey. Mike Myers is the biggest one that comes to mind. Adam Sandler, Will Ferrell. I mean, I can keep going here. Even the supporting cast around those guys, we're still going to Hollywood. Well, you know what you do when you go to SNL and you graduate from SNL? Do you know what you do now? Taco Bell commercials.
Not Pete, because before 11 a.m., I like to keep it toned down and simple, just like Taco Bell breakfast.
What's
with
happening
fluffy
here?
eggs, sausage, melty cheese, and a crispy hash
He's a
brown and a
comedian.
grilled tortilla. It's how everyone should wake up, and that's why you can all have a free breakfast Crunch Wrap. You could have a Crunch Wrap.
Offer valid every Tuesday in June.
Giving out free Crunch Wrap.
Okay, let's move on from this really quickly here. I mean, it's not funny. It's horribly written. It makes me wonder, like, did a woman write this? Because when stuff is horribly funny like this, I used to think it was just a generation in a whole. But I'm starting to realize, like, most of this shit isn't funny now because it's written by women. And I'm not trying to be, I know, on the surface it sounds like I'm being very disparaging towards a sex. And it's not that I am. It's just that show me where's the abundance of, female comedians selling out arenas? So if there's not an abundance of those at that level, why are we supposed to believe there's an abundance of great talent writing funny commercials for Taco Bell? Because it doesn't exist. That's why. And if it's the alternative, where this is the generation worse, people my age or younger that are guys, I mean, they're just not funny for whatever reason. And I really hope this is generally, I'm just going to hope that that's the case. And if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I mean, I'm okay about being wrong about this. But whoever's writing this, you're just not fucking funny. It's just that simple. All right, let's go to the next one here. These I can't fucking stand these commercials. Like, I'm going to try to keep it together while we play it, but or my dad goes. Okay, anyway, let's go ahead here.
You need a better network. Time to switch to Verizon, the most reliable 5G network in America.
I'm listening.
I think it's recorded off the TV.
5G phone on them.
Sweet.
So now, whether you're in the city or on the road,
Reception.
and getting the network you want and a brand new phone.
What?
Touchdown.
Switch
All right, hold on. Let's go back here. Can we talk about why this lady's so old? I mean, I think she was on SNL forever, wasn't she? I remember her at least playing, at least from 10 years ago. And she goes from being on SNL for over a decade to hawking Verizon plans to people. Generally, you want to go up in your career, Doing commercials isn't really, it's obviously a money grab. Like, these corporations are obviously paying these people. So, again, I'm not discounting that. I get it. Everyone needs their bag. Everyone needs their bread. That's fine. But I'm kind of looking at this from more of an artistic angle. Generally, like I said, you leave SNL, you go into movies. You don't start hawking Verizon plans to America for a cash grab. I mean, again, it's America. Do what you want. That's fine. But, you want me to respect you as an artist while you do this? I don't think so, Tim.
I don't think so, Tim.
And the other side of it, too, is there's a reason why artists, when I was younger in the 90s and 2000s, as I was alluding to earlier, they didn't do commercials. They didn't. It was, back then, I think the joke was, you would go, overseas internationally to, Japan. I think the Simpsons did one about this kind of. I think that's where this came from. And then Europe, too. And you would see, American celebrities doing commercials over there because there wasn't, this stigma attached to it. Back then, yeah, no American celebrity wanted to be caught dead doing commercials in America. And, I mean, is this a step forward? I mean, I'm sure if you're an actor and you're just someone that needs money and has access to getting cast into these, sure, I guess. But we're not talking about that. We're talking about your artistic integrity. And when you're trading artistic integrity for money, and then you want me to think you're, it just rings hollow to me. All right, so there's one more. Okay, this is a quick one. I mean, again, I get this. I don't really. I know why I'm pretending to. Scarlett Johansson is now hawking Prada. I mean, lady, you've been acting since you were 9 years old, maybe even younger than that. Why are you hawking Prada for free bags? I mean, what is this?
Love is reds and yellows and blues.
She's getting
and
old,
greens.
too. I think we're about the same age.
Our love is lavenders and browns and golds.
What?
And grays.
What is this commercial?
Our love is reds and yellows and blues.
In her greatest role ever known, Scarlett Johansson is a lady that talks about colors.
And greens. Our love is lavenders and browns and golds.
Watch her as she makes millions of dollars and gets free handbags from a company.
And grays. Our love is reds and yellows.
What is happening?
Blues and greens. Our love is lavenders and browns.
The only reason I'm playing this still is I'm taking a drink of water.
Grays. Our love is reds.
Okay, I can't
and
do this
yellows.
anymore. You see what I'm saying? You could just get some schlub to do this. What do I know? Maybe people buy these bags because she's hawking it. Well, fuck if I know. But it's just what is this? What is this? Okay, so I just wanted to kind of go over that. I've been noticing that as I watch TV here and there. Just what are these celebrities doing? I mean, I guess it's just a different world that I live in now. I'm, in a way, I'm kind of lost in the world that I still think we live in, and I'm constantly reminded that no, it is not. And this must be what being this age is all about, because it just feels like that's what I'm constantly being bombarded with is, what I think reality is versus what is being presented to me. Because, when it's being presented to you on TV and stuff, that's not really, you don't know what is narrative, reality, etc. I don't know. Anyway, so let's get on to our next story here. So I haven't talked about the restaurant industry in a while. I mean, this podcast, the number one episode, we did talk about, I think it was how servers, how you're getting screwed. And I might have done something more recently about the restaurant industry. I can't remember. It's been a little bit, but it wasn't. I know I haven't really done a focal point in a podcast about one. So this kind of caught my eye. It's about a month. I actually don't remember when I saw this, but it was also recently brought up to me. So I thought this would be a good opportunity to talk about just how the service industry has changed. And I don't mean in just more, because I've talked about that, in a macro level, but I found this situation that kind of just goes to show you how there's this social class issue within the restaurant industry, and how you see a lot of these things that these corporations, again, this is going to sound familiar from on the government side, but this is coming from a private business, so to speak. Maybe it's publicly traded. I could be wrong, but either way, from a business that's not run by the government, is that you have this huge entity basically preaching one thing, and then when it comes down for them to preach that same thing themselves, they're doing another. So we have an article that we're gonna dive into here. Let's do this actually. Give me one quick second. So the Rock Botttom restaurant, I've been to one in Phoenix before. It's actually a really cool restaurant. I think they brewed their own beers. It was very I think I was working at Yard House back then. It was in the Desert Ridge Mall out there in Phoenix, and I think they had a Rock Botttom there around the way it was the Yard House. And Yard House was kind of like Rock Botttom, but on steroids, because I think Yard House had 150-something beers on tap, and they made their own brew as well. But really, their own brew was made by a third party and then shipped into the company. I don't know what Rock Botttom did, but I think they brewed their own beer in-house, if I'm mistaken or not, but I know they did have their own beer brand, and I liked it. I think I got some fried chicken sandwich there. It was really good, and actually I guess I could tell this story. Girlfriend doesn't really watch this podcast, so we were pulling into the Desert Ridge Mall, and if you pull in there, it actually splits you can only go left or right, and Rock Botttom was off to the right, so we were going off to the right, and I was looking at I wasn't driving, she was, and we were looking at the restaurant, and I was probably just, commenting on what it looked like and stuff. And she also, remember, she's driving, was like, oh yeah, it looks great. And then I look forward, and the car is barreling down on a family of 3 or 4. It was 2 parents and a stroller that might have had 1 or 2 kids. Pretty sure it was 1 kid. Maybe there was 1 kid walking too. And I remember being like, brake, brake, brake. And she brakes. Everything was fine. But man, if looks could kill, that guy probably would have killed my girlfriend. And apparently that was his plan, because we parked the car, and, we get out, we start walking towards the restaurant, and he's basically giving it to, I don't really remember what he was saying. This is a pretty long time ago. But it was, at first, I was like, okay, this is kind of warranted. I mean, we almost just did run down the guy's family. I mean, I get it. I would probably want to have some words as well with that person. But, he just kept going. And, I mean, I didn't like that. I'm sure she felt horrible too. I mean, I would have, but it wasn't intentional. It wasn't like we were on the hunt for a family to run down, and again, it was warranted for him to, give us the dirty looks, to, voice his opinion about what, I get it. You know what I mean? But he kept going. We're probably another 15 steps away from the car, and he's still going. And then I finally just turned around. I think I yelled back at him something like, hey, man, just shut up and leave us alone, or something like that. I don't remember specifically, but whatever I said, it was the right button to push. A wire snapped in this guy's head, and he did a dead sprint to us. Yeah, I believe here in Florida, if I had a gun, I would have had pretty much the right to shoot him. I mean, even though I almost killed him by running him over, but I guess that's neither here nor there, because I didn't have any of those tools, so to speak. But he didn't do anything. He just got up in our face and started screaming and yelling. And I just kind of realized that when you're in situations like that, going to that person's level isn't really going to get anyone anywhere, especially you. I mean, this guy's already demonstrated that he's, unhinged on some level, because the look, the first few minutes of the interaction while we were in the car and out, fine, I get it. But when you're constantly screaming and yelling at someone over something that was a mistake and clearly wasn't intentional, all right, now you've crossed the line. And the only way I really diffused that, I remember, is just telling the guy, look, you're just embarrassing yourself, man. Just go back to your family. And then I had to say this over and over and over, to the point where I was not yelling like a madman to it, but just it wasn't screaming at the top of your lungs where you're, ah! It was just kind of, a raised voice that was echoing through a mall. Excuse me. And eventually he had to take the L and walk back to his family. So, I mean, I kind of felt great about that, because that was finally probably one of the first times I asserted myself with someone that was a little bit bigger than me, and knowing I had the moral high ground to stand on, as a bunch of people were watching this happen. But my girlfriend, not so much. And I actually remember calling someone about this, I think, like right after it happened, and my girlfriend being mortified. I mean, it just shows you the lack of self-awareness I used to have, and probably still do on some level. All right, so actually, this friend of mine I called actually has something to do with this story that we're talking about. So the Rock Bottom Brewery closes for good after more than 20 years in downtown. The Grand Avenue Craft Brewery restaurant and was a staple for the downtown restaurants and tourists and a lot of the people that work there. I'll just say there is a source in the restaurant that I have, and I have a quote from this person that we're going to go through really quickly. But let's just go through this article really quickly. So remember, this is River North. This is from a little bit ago. Where's the date on this? So this is January 9th, 2023. This is from earlier this year. So River North, after more than 20 years downtown, Rock Brewery restaurant suddenly closed Sunday night without explanation. Ooh. I've never been a part of a restaurant that closed indefinitely. Jeez. The only thing I've been a part of, it was a restaurant that was owned by Cracker Barrel. It was an offshoot of theirs over in Celebration, Florida. They ended up buying Maple Street Biscuit House and turning that into a Maple Street Biscuit House. So it technically wasn't like closing. It was just rebranding, so to speak, which was so crazy because I remember them telling us Cracker Barrel spent a lot of money on those locations, knowing that, I don't know, as these corporations, it's insane how much fucking money they have. So anyway, I've never been a part of a restaurant that closed like this, but like this is kind of like that. But, you know, we knew when it was happening. They were very upfront with everyone. Nothing like this, and nothing where I've ever even heard of something like this even happening. All right, back to the article here. Should I zoom in on that? I guess it's all right. So a sign on the door of the craft brewery and restaurant at 1 West Grand Avenue confirmed it was closed. Thank you for the great years of support. We will be closing Rock Bottom location 1/8/2023. I mean, nothing says, nothing gives you more of a warm, heartfelt feeling when this restaurant that has been serving your community just closes abruptly and just says thanks for the support. I mean, there's so much more you could have done. How much of that beer was left in the kegs? You could have thrown a party. I mean, I get it. It's Chicago. You could have just given it away to the criminals and just wrote it off as a tax write-off. Maybe not. I don't know if it works like that. Anyway, reached by phone, General Manager John the Bones Jones. Nope, sorry, that's the wrong one. John Jones said he could not say why the restaurant closed. Well, I believe that's probably a giant load of shit. He most likely knew. I'm sure he had a heads up of when it was going to close. Maybe I could be wrong about that. This is pure speculation, but the fact that this guy's towing the company line a little bit tells me if he didn't have a heads up, they probably did say, "Don't worry about this, John. We got you covered. Just get us through this. If you could do that, thanks." All right, so let me add myself here. I can't do that. It cuts the article off. All right, Jones referred Block Club to that's the name of the article, the whatever publication, to the restaurant's hospitality group, SPB Hospitality, for more information. The hospitality group could not immediately be reached for comment. I believe SBP Hospitality owns like Logan's. That's the only one I know off the top of my head. It's like Logan's, Rock Bottom. I did look into them a little bit, and I just remember basically it was like it was a restaurant. SBP basically bought Rock Bottom, I think, from like another restaurant group that went under or something like that, and then they acquired a bunch of different brands. So it's kind of one of those kind of it's not Darden, because that's what Darden kind of does too, where they have their. I don't think they really have their own brands. They just acquire others. I could be wrong about that. But Darden's the king of the big king. I mean, all of these guys. You have these little entertainment groups, or SVP Hospitality. There's another one that owns Ford's Garage. They're a part of another, because a lot of these groups it's not that they're like a part of one restaurant brand. They basically own like 5 or 6 different restaurant brands. Like I think in the Chicago area, they have one called like Let Us Entertain, and there's like 6 or 7. I mean, I haven't been up in Chicago, like lived up there in 15, 20 years. So back then, I think they had at least 5 or 6 different restaurant brands, like Wildfire. It's been so long, but so this is kind of one of those groups, it seems like, where it's just a parent company over various brands. Or the craft breweries were more prevalent. Tourists and locals alike flocked to Rock Bottom for its sprawling beer list, which featured craft brews that couldn't be found anywhere else. Goose Island already opened a brew pub by then, but big Chicago names like Half Acre and Revolution were still years away. Revolution. I'm not going to lie. Revolution's trash. Every time you go to Chicago, all these fucks like, Revolution. Revolution is straight trash. And I'm not even just talking about the ideology that it's trying to push, most likely, because I've been there. I guarantee you they're all left-wing fucking nutbags there. And the beer's trash. I'm sorry. Their IPA is trash. It's trash. It's not good. Maybe you local fucks up there think it's great. I love the pizza. Lou Malnati's pizza. So I'm guilty of bias there. But, like, there's a reason nobody's ever heard of your beer outside of the city limits of Chicago. Anyway, let me get back to the article here before I get in really big trouble. With multiple levels, including a rooftop deck, Rock Bottom was a destination for beer fans looking for something different. In 2003, it was home to the first festival of wood and barrel-aged beer, a nationally renowned event known as FOBAB, that now attracts thousands to UIC's credit union. Okay, sure, that sounds great. It looks like they got a picture here. They're just like, sorry, bitch, you can't work here, or you can't drink here either. Yeah. The downtown closure comes after Rock Bottom closed locations in Milwaukee and Minneapolis. Okay, so they had a Milwaukee, Minneapolis. So just from what I know, working in restaurants for so fucking long, 30+ years, I think. This is kind of like the sky is blue, observation is that, when you're downsizing like that, it's obvious your brand is struggling. And just based on what this is saying up here, when they opened this location, they weren't competing with anyone. The Goose Island Brew Pub, I guess, wasn't there. Revolution and Half Acre, they weren't up yet. So they apparently weren't innovating enough to stay. Like I said, I bet that, wonder if that Rock Bottom in Phoenix is even still around, because they had that Yard House put right around the corner. You could see, back then it was a private company. Yard House was, so Yard House, the private company, was putting itself next to those Rock Bottom places, it seems, or at least that was one of their strategies, and it worked, because Yard House ended up getting bought by Darden, which means there's a lot more capital behind it. And Milwaukee's closed. I'd be curious if the Phoenix location is even open, because it was right next to a Yard House, which destroys Rock Bottom as far as the brewery selection goes. I do remember kind of coming away with that. And when your brand is kind of known for its beer and you're not innovating, when you have a company like Yard House right around on the other side of the mall from you, I'm not surprised that they're closing locations. I'm more surprised that they're not telling their employees about what they're doing. That's a little bit more surprising, but not really at the same time. But you just think in the hospitality, it's just so ironic, because you think in the hospitality industry, they would be very hospitable to everyone, employees to their employer to the employees, but it's anything but. Surprise, surprise, right? The most ironic statement of the day. All right, back to the article. In 2020, Kraftwerks Holding, the previous parent company of Rock Bottom, filed for bankruptcy. The company previously said the move was an effort to reduce debt and better position its breweries and restaurants for long-term growth, said according to a 2020 press release. Well, you know what else would have set you up for long-term growth? Innovation. But I have a feeling that might have helped. At the time, the parent company owned 338 restaurants, including chains Logan's Roadhouse, Old Chicago, and Gordon Birch. That's the other one. In 2020, SPB Hospitality bought the restaurants from Kraftwerks for $93 million. Jesus Christ. According to the Wall Street Journal. So SBP Hospitality sounds like they got quite the deal to buy. So they bought Rock Bottom for $93 million. That in itself is definitely a tell into how much that company was struggling, because I can also tell you that in 2012, the Yard House brand sold to Darden for $550 million. So there's a significant difference there, because obviously Yard House is on the up and up. Rock Bottom is going the other way. And then, in a way, I guess, to no one's surprise, if you're on the executive level in Rock Bottom or in the parent company, obviously you're like, oh yeah, they're going to downsize and close. I mean, I don't want to sound evil and being like, oh, well, this should have been obvious. It's not obvious. It's only obvious to the people that have access to this information. But it's just so crazy that you have a company like this that treats its employees this way. I mean, it's just, it's not that it should be illegal, but like, I don't know. It just doesn't feel right either. And I think that's where people get so frustrated, because it's like, you know what the right thing is to do, and you choose not to do it, because for the bottom line, so to speak. And it's just, I think that's what gives people such a dirty taste in their mouth about capitalism. So there's also a quote I want to get to. So I can't unveil the source. Maybe I can one day. Who knows? I'm just not going to just out this person, but this was the person that was working within. And this is a quote that they didn't give to me directly, but it was put out there, so I'm going to use it. Yeah. So here's what it is. I will always look back fondly on my time with Rock Bottom, but SPB, that's the hospitality company, is a trash company whose core values include being respectful and inclusive. Where was the respect and inclusivity for our jobs or the knowledge of them being taken away so suddenly? Huh? What's that? What was it? You just suck dick. You just suck dick for Coke, huh? Half Baked, the Dave Chappelle, Bob Saget thing. They preach these things, yet when it comes down to it, they don't give a fuck. This is all caps. They don't give a fuck about any of us. Let this serve as a warning to anyone thinking about joining a restaurant concept owned by this corporation. And I would honestly say to anyone considering working in the restaurant industry, that should just be your overall, thought process, because it's red water. Red Ocean. There's a book that PBD on the Patrick Bet David, that his podcast, he always talks about blue ocean, red ocean. And it's essentially it's more of like a corporate book about, swimming in blue waters, which is like, you're not poaching, you're not, doing anything shady to your enemies or the people you're competing against. Whereas in the red ocean, you're poaching, it's like you're breaking the guy's window so you could sell more glass. I mean, just stuff, not saying that's what's happening, but like stuff like that kind of stuff. That's the red ocean, And that seems to be where the hospitality industry lies. Like, amongst each other, amongst the way its employees. I mean, you could even kind of see this class divide during COVID. From my personal experience in the restaurant industry, especially during COVID, it's too bad I didn't talk about this. I mean, it was just so overwhelming to deal with. I'm sure you probably didn't I don't really remember recording a lot back then during the pandemic. But a lot of it was because I was stuck working in a restaurant for almost 9-10 hours a day, dressed like a surgeon. And what I could not get over was how these fucking people in the corporate office, they would basically be able to, labor, your labor, it's 12.5%, labor. It's like, okay, I mean, I get it. So like this was Tijuana Flats here in Florida. What they were basically doing was, instead of paying anyone an hour, like they were paying people a decent hourly wage, but the way they were getting around it was they weren't letting you work more than 2 to 3 hours, because what would happen is I would go to the computer, swipe over. There's a way you can just kind of look at sales, this, that, the other, and one of the numbers you look at is the labor that you're dealing with. The labor, it's a percentage by the hour, and then an overall percentage. And I don't even remember what it was supposed to be, something ridiculously low, like 12.5%, I think. I mean, it was something like that. And if you were 0.1 over that, you had hell to pay to anyone above you and the layers above them. And what they would do to get around this was, you'd have a cook, maybe a cashier or two, a prep guy, and maybe 2 cooks depending on the restaurant. And all these people are being paid between $11, $14, I believe. I mean, I think one of the cooks there was overly paid at $14. They hated this. They liked this guy, but they hated having to pay him so much. So whenever he worked, they were like, make sure he's out of there the second the rush is over. So they basically just wanted to pay this guy to come in, be a line cook for a few hours in the morning through the rush, and the second the rush was over, and get him out. Because we don't want to pay. He just spikes the labor. And it's the same thing with the prep guy. They would just get him out. And then they would tell you, like, oh, well, if you need to prep something, if you need to get in the kitchen, you're the manager, you go and do it. And it's like, I guess, but you're not really paying me that much more than the line cook. So, why? Don't be so fucking cheap. But obviously, okay, so let me get back to my main point. So that's what I was dealing with. So now I'm doing all the fucking work as the manager, which is fine, but they weren't really compensating me for what I should be doing for having, working in the restaurant and then having taken all the responsibility in the peripherals of said restaurant. Is what was happening was you would get a call from the home office that was basically dictating policy, almost like our friend said here, where you have this home office, this company saying, preaching certain ideals. And in this case, these people were preaching, these same ideals. This is right around that Black Lives Matter stuff was going on, and I think they put something out that we support Black Lives Matter. That's fine, but you're just selling tacos, bro. I do know what you're trying to do. They want to make sure young people want to still work there, but just say nothing. Good God. And anyway, so these people from the home office are running the company from home while I'm in there dressed like a surgeon frying fucking tacos like a bitch. And, they're sending out emails in their pajamas, doing nothing, having their assessments about the restaurants, sometimes complaining about the way the restaurants were doing their business. And it was just frustrating because it's like, hey, bitch, if you're so worried about labor, if you're so worried about the way things are run here, why don't you put some fucking pants on, put on a polo shirt, come on down to the restaurant, and work, because either way you're getting paid just like I am. So if it's such a fucking problem, just put on your fucking pants and come on down. But did they do that? No. They just wanted to sit home like some elitist fuck and dictate policy in pajamas from their keyboard while their kids are running around and they're sipping coffee and jerking off to Oprah. They're just nonsense. It's just fucking nonsensical. And I can totally understand why this person said these things that they did, because I'm sure on some level they were dealing with exactly what I was talking about. Because again, this is a place or a business in Chicago. I don't know where SPB, where the fuck it's called, is headquartered, but it's just an abomination of what these companies are doing to the people that they employ. What I had to go through, what the whole restaurant sector had to go through during COVID, and just how these businesses treat their employees. Like down here in Central Florida, I don't know what it's like anywhere else, but here what's really crazy is you can see what they're doing. Like when I was first getting into the restaurant industry, there was a lot of guys in their 50s and 60s that were still working 8-9 hours a day, and they were working hard. But guess what? They were also being paid, high 5 digits, 6 digits in some cases. Some of those guys have been working for, in the restaurant industry or for that company for 20 plus years. And, so they'd been with it as a brew. I mean, whatever the situation may be, they had been working in the restaurant industry for so long and staying in it for so long because it was paying so well. Well, around here, everyone's like 24 that works in the management team specifically, and it's just, and then it's also kind of inverted because you'll see people who are servers that are, on the higher side of the 30s. I mean, obviously if you go to Disney, everyone's old there because those servers are going to make like $100,000 a year. And just like the ushers at Wrigley Field, they ain't going anywhere. They're going to hang on to that job till they fucking die. And I kind of understand that because there's just so much volume at both of those places. And people want to be there when the Cubs win the World Series in Wrigley Field. Hint, it's probably not going to happen. But I understand what's going on there. But everywhere else, it's not really the case. You go to Chili's, Macaroni Grill, what a corporate restaurant, insert here. You go there, the managers are all 25. Why? Because they're too fucking stupid to understand that they're being underpaid. That job that they're working, it used to pay $80,000, $90,000, $120,000 in some cases, depending on where you're at. It probably came with a company car too. In fact, I know it does. That would be a place called Miller's Ale House. There's a general manager that used to work there that told me that. $120 a year and a car. Do you think they're paying that now? And the story like this is exactly why. They don't give a fuck about you. They just want you there. If you're a body that can breathe, they're going to pay you that shit wage. They're going to treat you like shit. And they're going to ask you to come in and do it all over again. And they're going to give you just enough money to come back for more. Well, that's going to do it for this week. Thanks for tuning into Ready Said Podcast. I'm Joe Persinger, and this is the ever-evolving, never-ending Ready Said Podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. Shout out to all you guys. Thanks for tuning in. See you next week, you fucks.